Hi, I am Matt Harper, and for the class 4400, I chose my population, my vulnerable population on the elderly living alone. So this is the presentation about that and the health concerns that go along with that. So the description of the population is pretty straightforward and simple. It's taking a look at elderly individuals, mainly 65 and older, and just talking about those individuals that live by themselves. They're isolated from society or family, and we'll also look at those that are abused and neglected. So, size of the population. There wasn't really a search engine to look at, and specifically isolated elders, but we can look at the elderly population um, and the statistics of those. So locally, 14.6 of the population in Weber County is 65 or older. Um, so compared from Weber County to state, so Utah is 11.1% 65 or older, and then nationally 15.8% is 65 or older. So statewide and locally, we are lower than the national average for having elderly individuals. So the difference in population size locally compared to nationally, um, so Weber County compared to nationally would be 1.2% lower than national average. Um, and then as for 65 plus living alone, um, we're looking at nationally 36% of elderly women are living alone, and 20% of elderly men are living alone. And that was taken from americashealthrankings.org from a survey conducted in 2015. Um, as for Utah, we actually rank number one in healthiest state in regards to senior social isolation. So that's actually really good. Um, And then that was scored from six risk factors of social isolation in adults ages 65 or older. And those six risk factors are poverty, living alone, divorced, separated or widowed, never married, disability, and independent living difficulty. And that was collected from um, americashealthrankings.org. And they got that information from the US Census Bureau and American Community Survey. And then most recent was 2017, which they got that from. Contributing factors for the social determinants of health for isolated elderly is age, so we're looking at 65 and older. Income comes into play with that, whether they have enough income to afford somewhere to live or be placed in a nursing home. And that kind of goes along with the housing situation. Also looks at their social situation, such as family and friends and support they get from those. Specific concerns for isolated elderlies would be obviously the isolation, which can lead to depression, anxiety, physical health problems, neglect, and then social health deterioration. Root causes, so some of the things that can cause the elderly to kind of be put in this situation or position of isolation is obviously death or divorce of a spouse or significant other. So they, married could be married for decades and are just so used to living with someone their whole lives, and then you know, death can happen to one of them, and then all of a sudden they find themselves alone and isolated and have to figure out how to live by themselves from that point. Um, and then access or relationship to family members. as well as relationship to friends or community groups. So if family's close by, if they're involved in the um, patient's life, if they're around to help out or kind of help their specific needs, if they're involved in their lives, and then friends or community groups. So does the the root cause could be, this person doesn't have any friends or doesn't attend any community groups, um, doesn't really participate in any elderly groups like a bingo, or could be part of a church group. And family members could be, living out of state or not around, or maybe they never even haven't had any children, and it was just the elderly person and their spouse, and the spouse died, so now they're isolated. Root cause also could be health conditions. So are they isolated because certain psychosocial conditions like depression or schizophrenia, um, income and financial support, like I talked about earlier, are they able to sustain themselves? Were they able to save up money for retirement? Are they part of Social Security? Do they receive Medicare, Medicaid services? And then lack of mobility. Um, People can be isolated because they're, over time as you age and your health deteriorates, your mobility goes down. Do they have arthritis? Are they disabled? Um, in which case, it'd be pretty difficult to get around and go out into the world and interact with people socially and emotionally. For the hierarchy of needs, so physiological, we're just going to assume that that's met. They got a roof over their head, have food and water, but unmet would be the safety, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. Um, and then anticipated functional level would be decline in overall health if those four listed under unmet aren't met. And then likely health outcomes due to that in the unmet category would be lower utilization of healthcare and increased risk of mortality, dementia, and developing coronary heart disease / stroke, which has been shown to be linked to isolation of the elderly. Also shown in studies has been loneliness and isolation um, in being factors to poor mental health and physical health, and also early death. And then communicable diseases or infections. Obviously, as you age, the immune system will have a slower response, which leads to increased risk of getting sick. But the thing about the communicable diseases or infections with the isolated individuals is actually, if you have fewer contact with individuals, it's going to be decreased risk for communicable diseases or infections. And then the non-communicable diseases or infections, also with the aging process, your body heals more slowly due to fewer immune cells, and then the immune system's ability to detect and correct cell imperfections and defects, so that, gives off the increased risk of cancer. Also, we look at isolation-induced depression, mobility issues, and loneliness. Specific concerns, we got the things we've already kind of mentioned: mobility, hygiene, nutrition, social interaction, recreation, as I talked about earlier. Are they involved in any, bowling, elderly bowling groups or bingo or any type of community resources? And then obviously, since they're isolated, there's an increase for depression and suicide. Specific concerns, we have abuse, the physical, emotional, sexual neglect, and then people taking advantage of their finances. And then in the United States by themselves, more than 500,000 reports of elder abuse are reported to authorities every year, and millions more cases go unreported. And those are my references. And that was my presentation.